Happy Saturday, folks. So, today on the podcast, we have Simon James from Bitcoin Events UK and Ireland. As you know, we talk a lot about Bitcoin on the show, but today we're really focusing on some of the events specific to the UK and Irish market that's happening in the Bitcoin space, why it's good for circular economy, how you can get involved, and how even small businesses are adopting it, and what it means for the future of Bitcoin really as a currency. So Simon, yeah, by way of an intro, maybe tell the audience about yourself, about the events, about BTC events.
Sure. Well, it's been a long road for me. Bitcoin. I started first discovered Bitcoin, I suppose, in 2013, right at the end of that year. So it was where the price was going crazy up into the December. I think was sort of the peak of that bull run, and like most cycles, I suppose people start to get interested in when they see it in the news and number goes up, and I'd seen something on Twitter actually about it, and started looking into it. But it was a long period that I bought a little bit and was very sort of excited about the technology of it and the freedom side of it, but I didn't get involved at all in the community side of it. I didn't know any other Bitcoiners. I didn't reach out to any others at all. I was just sort of trying to orange pill my friends and family, I suppose, for a long time. And then it wasn't really until after COVID 2022, early 2022, I was watching the Bitcoin conference in the US, and I think it's the Miami one, and thought how huge the meetup scene was in the US, and that they get meetups with 30, 40, 50 people in different states, and I thought that the UK was really massively lacking behind in the social side of Bitcoin, and that we could or should be doing a lot better than we were. I was in a couple of Telegram groups with other Bitcoiners at that point then in the UK, and there was, I'd see a little bit of discussion of one or two had met in a pub, and it wasn't really an organized thing, and it was kind of there was two or three of them, and then they'd do it again a few months later. But there were a few meetups. But anyway, I decided to start my own meetup, as there were some. So I started the Northamptonshire Bitcoin Network, and got that sort of started, set up a Twitter account and everything. And I thought, well, there must be a website where I can post my meetup to, so that other people can see it. Like a Bitcoin only UK website, but there wasn't anything like that. There was meetup.com, but there's a lot of shitcoins and a lot of crypto things, and you kind of got to wade through all that. And it's obviously that's a global thing; it's not a UK specific thing. So I thought, well, I'll start my own website. So I found bitcoinevents.uk was available, the domain. So I bought that and started the website just as a simple blog, really, to start with. I trawled Twitter and some of the Telegram groups to find what meetups were already out there, and there was 10 meetups that were sort of organised things. There was one in Wales and Bristol. Where else? There was 10 altogether. One in Birmingham and a couple in London, and so I put those all onto the website. I contacted the organisers, the meetup organisers from each of those, and created a Telegram group where all those meetup organisers came into that Telegram group. And then from there, I just kind of encouraged other people to maybe start more, meetups, and maybe sometimes people were traveling an hour or so to come to my meetup. I went on a couple of podcasts, and then people reached out to me afterwards and said, "Yeah, I'd really like to start a podcast, to start a meetup. Maybe,
meetup, yeah.
Could you help me?"
Because we have enough podcasts to go.
Yeah. So I thought, so I sort of found myself in the middle of this, like a network hub, if you like. People were coming to me. I had the website, and so yeah, I just encouraged wherever I could um, a little bit of organization.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Centralizing in order to decentralize.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, that's cool. That's very cool. I mean, I could see how, I mean, yeah, like the stuff you mentioned at the start about the UK lagging behind
Yeah,
with the US, especially in this space. I think I was amazed by it. I was amazed how with the access to the internet, we all have access to pretty much all Bitcoin literature. It's available for free.
yeah,
We all feel the pain of fiat in our daily lives, and yet somehow we don't bridge that gap as a country. It's just a bit strange to me.
yeah.
Why do you attribute that to? I mean, what is it about the Brits that we don't we don't seem to like Bitcoin so much?
Well, I think there's a different, uh, obviously we're different to the US. I mean, the US originally was built on that kind of freedom, and
Mm,
it's much more closer in time to the founding of that country, and the much more freedom kind of orientated. So I think they naturally gravitate towards Bitcoin more than
mm,
we do. We're very much an old nation and reserved, very much reserved as a people. Um,
mm,
and and then Bitcoin, people that generally get into Bitcoin, I suppose, are kind of introverted. Maybe people that are really, will study subjects and dive deep into these subjects. They're not generally extroverted people.
mm,
So I think all those sort of things combined mean that we end up not really, especially in this country, we just didn't have a real social side to it. I mean, you know, there were there was a conference in the UK in 2012, very
right.
early on, which people kind of. I mean, unfortunately, I wasn't at it, but it did happen. It's on the talk Bitcoin talk forums.
Mm,
You can still see the posts about it on there. But it was, yeah, it's just the way that we are here, I think, in this country. So, but I think it's beginning to change now. That
mm,
there's a momentum building now. There's friendships have been made over the last 2 or 3 years.
yeah,
There's a lot of people traveling from. I tried to get to different meetups, and that's
gotcha.
one thing about being in the centre of the country. Kind of a little bit easier for me. It's a sort of equal distance for me to go to the Sheffield meetup, for instance, as it is to go to a London one. So I can
Yeah, yeah,
kind
yeah.
of get around a little bit, and having a few things like the Bitcoin events Telegram group that we have with all the meetup organizers now. That gives it a bit of connective tissue, if you like,
Gotcha.
to connect some of these meetups, and friendships are forming.
Yeah, no, it's good. I mean, it's active participation. That's what we really, really need, right? I mean, be the change you want to see, sort of thing, right? It's kind of it's
Yeah,
great with me, for example. I'm out there blogging to the Ethernet, talking about the virtues of Bitcoin. But
yeah,
if there's a Bitcoin event a couple of blocks from me and I couldn't be asked to go to it, I'm not really helping the ethos either, right? So I
yeah,
think, I think, I think it's yeah, you just gotta pull your finger out sometimes and just get involved because that's what it really needs.
yeah. I think there's levels that people go through with Bitcoin, and I was reading a thing this morning actually that I think said that there's 1.3 million people in the UK that own Bitcoin.
Wow,
I mean, that's
that's a lot higher than what I would have thought. Yeah.
yeah. See, a lot of those people, I think, because I know guys, some people that I work with, they own they own some Bitcoin, so they're in their early 30s. They're using it as a, like we all do, to kind of start with. They're using it to make a bit of money so that they can buy a better car, or they're looking
Mm,
at it in that sort of way. They're not
yeah.
looking at it from the start as a revolutionary kind of technology, and they're not into that side of it. They're just thinking, well, I'll put a few thousand in, and maybe
Yeah.
turn that into 10 grand, and then I'll buy a better
Yeah.
car.
Yeah.
Those sort of people are not going to go to a Bitcoin meetup because
Mm,
they're not into Bitcoin. They're just
gotcha.
into
Yeah.
making money and using
Yeah.
Bitcoin
Yeah.
as a vehicle for that.
Yeah,
So
and I think number go up is one of the most crucial psychological sort of
yeah,
barriers to entry for Bitcoin to begin with, right? I mean, that's what draws everyone's attention. That brings
yeah,
it on mainstream media. Financial companies get involved, as we're seeing in the US and in other parts of the world. I think number go up is a great feature of Bitcoin, but not necessarily the end all and be all of Bitcoin. I think there's a subtlety
Absolutely
to
not.
that,
No.
right?
Yeah.
That people don't necessarily get on first glance. When you look at a
It's an
graph, it
outer
doesn't tell
layer.
you that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's an outer layer of like an onion, and you know, like Bitcoin maximalism is in the middle, and you start off naturally on that outside number go up layer,
yeah,
and that brings people in. It brought me in.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
what it's eventually after one cycle at least, but probably two cycles, you start to, and maybe because you're a bit more relaxed and you don't have to worry about money so much, that you
yeah.
can then look and see, okay, well, I've been in, but this has changed my life, Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Maybe you start thinking, well, maybe it can help change my friend's life, and then
Mm,
my neighbor's life, and you start to reverse that kind of selfish sort of feeling that it's just to better yourself. You've already sorted yourself out, and then you can start
mm,
sorting others out. So you
yeah,
start to look
yeah,
outside, and join up, I suppose, with other people, and there's only so much, especially if your wife or girlfriend or family are not really on board. You want to have those conversations with people. So
yeah,
to
yeah,
have those conversations, you've got to get out and go and meet other Bitcoiners.
yeah,
And
absolutely. Yeah.
yeah, we
So
get there's tons of when people come to meetups, and you see them all the time and it's their first meetup that they've been to. They're so
yeah,
kind of like, wow, I don't have to
yeah.
explain how Finney is, or
Yeah, yeah,
what
yeah,
proof
yeah.
of work is. We can just talk about it more
Yeah,
naturally,
it's brilliant, isn't it?
it's
It's like you've
brilliant.
entered level two
Yeah,
of the next stage of the game. Because I remember like even talking to the guys at Boom Bap a couple of Tuesdays
yeah,
ago, and I was like, so the owners obviously were new to Bitcoin. They were like,
yeah,
oh my God, but how do you ensure there's scarcity, and how do you know there won't be? And I'm like, okay, well that's one conversation.
yeah,
But then the guy I was speaking with, obviously, I think you know him as well. He got it straight away, and we're not even talking about that kind of stuff. We're talking about like how do we scale this thing? How do you get more
yeah,
people involved? What happens if the X, Y, and Z happens in the future? Legislation, all that kind of stuff. So I think it's this is the only angle where Bitcoin is a pyramid scheme, right? It's like you got to build up to the top, but in every other aspect, it's actually it's the gift that keeps on giving, and I think number go up is the entry
yeah.
drug to this,
Yeah, it's
um,
natural human nature, I think, to be to want to better yourself, and when you
yeah,
see something that is so obviously a great tool for bettering yourself, then that's what attracts you. And
yeah,
unless
yeah.
you're
So
already like a human rights activist or something, which most
yeah,
people
well,
aren't.
but even I mean, again, Bitcoin could also improve human rights activists as well. I mean, I
Oh
don't
yeah,
see how Bitcoin sort of degrades anything that I've come across. It just makes
yeah.
everything better.
Of course, yeah, yeah, yeah. It does. Yeah, it just takes people a while to realize that. And when we talk in those sort of ways to people, the natural assumption is to think, well, this is a scam. Nothing is that good.
Mm,
Nothing
mm,
solves all these
mm.
problems. So they're looking for
Yeah,
flaws in it, and that's good because they ask all these sort of questions, like Boom Back Burger are asking you questions,
yeah,
and but we've heard them all before, and they're easy to back and say, well, yeah, I
yeah,
know,
yeah, yeah,
right? Well,
yeah.
after a little while, the defense is that they've got no ammunition left, and it's like,
No,
okay,
no, no.
I joined the
Yeah.
cult.
Exactly. So okay, well, talking about the cult then from a numbers perspective, right? So obviously you're I guess you may be privy to some of, let's say, high level figures on what the traffic that you're getting on your website and what are the sort of events, the numbers, the locations. Do you want to share any of
Yeah.
that stuff with us?
Well, when I said before that there was 10 meetups to start with, that was in April 2022. So now in what are we, October 2024, there's
Mm.
58 meetups. So we've
Wow.
filled a lot of those gaps all over the country, and yeah, I mean, there's still tons of room for more. When you look at the
Mm.
map, it looks like it's kind of covered. There's a bit of a gap up in the northeast region around Hull and
Mm.
Lincoln. There is a Lincolnshire meetup at that sort of area, and definitely Wales could do with one or two more.
Right.
So if people are travelling, an hour to a meetup, then it's probably a safe bet that you could start your own in
Yeah,
your
yeah,
own
yeah, yeah.
area
No,
because
exactly.
people finish work and they're and then they think, oh God, I've got to drive 45 minutes to a meetup. They're not going to come every week, or certainly not every week, every month.
Mm.
You'll get the core dedicated few, but the easier it becomes, or the more that there are, the easier it becomes for people. If they've only got to go 20 minutes or around the corner,
Mm.
they'll go to them. So there's loads of room for more. In the website gets a fair amount of traffic, and what I've actually found recently, I've started a newsletter recently,
Mm-hmm.
which is listing all the meetups, and I've found that that's been growing quite steadily, and it's probably that's probably getting more traffic now than the website is actually.
Nice.
So that's sort of on an upward trend, and hopefully, again, with the price goes up, more people come in and get
Yeah.
curious and think, oh, maybe I should go and meet some Bitcoiners in real life. So
Yeah.
we'll see what happens in the next 12 months, but
Mm.
it's definitely an upward trajectory, and meetups, they seem to come in little waves. Like there won't be any new ones for 6 months, and then I'll get 2, 3, 4, one after another.
Mm.
Seems to be just after Christmas. Weirdly, we had a probably 4 or 5 at the start of the year, and we haven't had many since. The Women of Bitcoin
Yes.
was one of the last meetups that's popped
Yeah.
up. They
I'm
just
trying
had.
to I'm trying to get I'm trying to get them on this podcast as well. So let's
Oh
see.
right,
I had a chat with Suze. I don't you know her, right? She's
I know Susie. Yeah,
yeah,
and
yeah. Susie was on last week. She was talking
yeah,
about her trials and trepidations with the BBC's reporting. So it's just really sort of it's unbelievable. I don't know
yeah,
if
yeah,
you're aware of that story,
yeah.
but
I am. Yeah, yeah,
yeah. So
yeah,
she kind of went to yeah, she went in the weeds on it, and it's unbelievable the mainstream media's perception of some of this stuff, and the fact that they're still peddling this nonsense as fact to me
yeah,
is just offensive. I mean, it's not even balanced. Like it's not even notionally balanced. It's literally just bollocks.
yeah, yeah. It's another front on which we've got to kind of battle. That it's just to have to work and push back against that barrage of mainstream media, which the masses are kind of always consuming.
Mm,
They dismiss Bitcoin because of a word or two that a journalist says, and then it takes a lot of work for us to then undo that. You've then got to convince people that the mainstream media is talking rubbish, which is a hard thing
it's
to
hard
do,
sell. It's because
because people just blindly trust the media.
yeah, and and I find that really peculiar about British culture. So like like I said, I'm Irish, right? And we used to watch a lot of things like Mock the Week and Frankie Boyle. I don't know if you remember
Mm.
from like a couple of probably about
Yeah,
10, 15 years ago, where
yeah,
it was a lot more, I'd say, free. They could literally just sort of go batshit crazy against the government or say whatever the hell they want and get away with it to a certain degree. But at the
yeah.
same time, today when I look at some of these talk shows, it almost seems sort of everyone's pulling punches. Weirdly, like
Right.
it's just I
Nobody
don't know if
wants to
it's
offend these days, do they?
yeah, I just don't like. It's like we've lost that edge, and the same thing with London. So I went to school in Wembley, 20, 25 years ago. Very different culture in the schools there when I was growing up. We just had a baby, and we're living in a posher part of London now. And when I go out on the streets on a Friday night, it just all seems as if everything is running on the second gear. It's like
Mm.
everyone's making a conscious effort to not offend you, no, to not even voice their opinion in on the off chance it offends you. It's kind of like really mellow all of a sudden, and I don't know if that's a gradual thing or if it's just me who feels that. But I think it just comes down to this perception of, oh my god, mainstream media says XYZ, so we have to adhere to it at all costs. you know
Yeah, I think the COVID period knocked a lot of wind out of people, and I think that people are still reeling a little bit from that just depressed everybody so much that
mm,
we haven't really, we've lost a lot of any kind of energy that we had, I suppose, as a nation. Well, it happened all over the world, but yeah, I think yeah, it's a weird time, with and it's just the slow sort of degradation of society is getting on top of people, and just they don't know what to do. Most people don't
mm,
have a solution for the problem. You drive to
mm,
work and you see every 100 yards there's another great pothole in the road, and it's just not getting fixed. It's just it's a weird world that we're living in. It's like an alternate
Mm.
reality or something that's every year is a little bit worse than the last, and I think it's getting people down. And
Yeah.
it's only the
Yeah.
Bitcoiners that are kind of positive about it, because
Exactly. Exactly.
there's something hopeful that the future is better.
Mm.
Everybody else just thinks the future's going to be worse because there's been so much of it over the last 30 years or so of slowly
Yeah.
getting worse that they
Yeah.
can't
It's like
see
it's
it.
like yeah, it's like a slow sort of strangulation that
Yeah,
lasts centuries, right? So it's so sort of bleak that you don't, or so meek even that you don't even feel it in the instant.
no.
But when you look back for like 20 years, it's a hell of a degradation, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah. You kind of start thinking, well, I'm sure there wasn't this many potholes in the road when I was a kid, and like you start questioning your own sanity. Yeah, it's definitely things aren't getting better; they're getting worse.
Mm,
Um, and yeah, and that disheartens people. But hopefully we can dig. We can all just individually try and you know get people to understand Bitcoin. I think, and education, and then they'll. It's like having to relearn positivity then,
mm.
which takes a little while to turn people's psychologically around. It took me quite a while to kind of get my head around all the good that it can do. But once you're there, you start thinking about your future and how you can create a better future for yourself and your
Mm.
family. A rising tide floats all boats, and
Yeah, yeah, absolutely,
we'll,
absolutely.
we'll hopefully
The
turn it around.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think like I mean, do you touch on these kind of so the events specifically? Is it a particular theme to them? Are they simply just sort of have a few pints, talk about Bitcoin, or is there an educational angle? Is there an orange pilling angle? Are there talks? What way do you structure them?
Yeah, well, I mean, Bitcoin events really is just like I said, it was a website that just lists all the meetups. We don't necessarily organize.
Mm,
Every one of the meetups is independently run.
gotcha.
We just kind of connect them together. So there's no agendas set at any of them. But yeah, most meetups are pub meetups,
Hmm.
and most meetups are still in that sort of growing stage where they're still trying to. I think there's levels with the meetups in attendance where if you're getting 5 or 6 guys every week that are turning
Mm,
up, then it's probably not. You're probably not quite at the stage where you're going to be doing a stand-up talk or presentation. Once you're getting consistent, sort of 12 to 15, then that's when people start to having talks, and we've had some talks at our meetup a couple of times. We've had like an introductory, what is Bitcoin? We've had a self custody workshop, which was quite
nice.
good, and we had a bulk card workshop where we took bulk cards and learned how to set those up. Sort of with a self-sovereign wallet,
Yeah.
and we got Peter Rounce, who wrote the open source code for the bulk card. He came and
Mm,
did a talk. So we're sort of at that mixture where most week to week, and then there's probably at the moment, I'd say on average there is about 8 meetups in the UK and Ireland
mm,
now every week. So most will be, of that 8, probably 6 will be pub meetups.
mm.
There's the Bitcoin Walk in Edinburgh.
Right.
We have one now in Northants. We have a walk here now as well. So there's something a little bit different, and it's nice to see they're not all just just 5 guys meeting in a pub, having a
Yeah,
beer,
yeah, yeah.
talking about Bitcoin. There is a bit more of an educational angle to some of them, or there's something a little bit different. Yeah, there's the Lake District
Mm,
meetup, which is more sort of quarterly. They do big hiking trips together. Yeah, there's the walk. There's Rail Bedford.
of course,
That's
yeah.
every home game there is pretty much a Bitcoin meetup. So that's
Hmm.
around the football, which is good. So there's a few different ones. One of the one that's kind of in the works at the moment is actually a yoga meetup, where it's a yoga class combined with a Bitcoin meetup, which is presently only just online, so it's not listed on
Right.
Bitcoin events because we don't list online ones. But that is going to become a weekly Bitcoin yoga meetup,
Nice. Yeah.
apparently. So that's something quite different. And when that becomes a one in meet space, then it will be listed on the website as well. So
Brilliant. I
yeah,
mean,
it
yeah.
crosses over into all sorts of,
Yeah.
there's all, whenever people get together, that can be a Bitcoin meetup, So
True. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. No, it does seem quite eclectic, and then because I'm, like I said, we just had a baby, so we're in the middle of sort of, trying to meet other parents in a similar area and then kind of
right,
doing that. So it's like I just feel, I mean, for any sense of community, right? You need that commonality, and just because
yeah,
you put two Bitcoiners in a room, yes, they will talk about Bitcoin because the bloody thing is so addictive. But also you're gonna end up talking about a whole lot else, right? You're gonna learn from
yeah.
each other. It's just something that brings you together.
Yeah, I have friends that I work with, and they say, they know what I'm up to, and they say, well, "What do you do? Just talk about like the price or where it's going to go." And quite often we barely talk about,
The
well,
price.
definitely not talk about the price, but barely talk about Bitcoin itself. It's talking about there's a lot of talk of homeschooling or
Mm. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
being self-sufficient with food. There's a couple of people that come to our Northants meetup that have allotments, and they're talking about they're trading seeds and just
Nice.
all those kind of surrounding topics.
Yeah,
Education is a big one, homeschooling and just being, diet, health is a
yeah.
big one too. My wife is really into the health side of things, so she came into Bitcoin through the health side of things. So
Mm.
so there's so many subjects, and we talk about those. So it's not,
Yeah.
we're not just sitting there looking at charts and trying to figure out where the prices go, and they're far from it.
Yeah, yeah,
So
no, absolutely. I think no, that's brilliant. I mean, like from a okay, well, switching tack slightly to the merchant's perspective, right?
yeah,
So, assuming, of course, I understand you don't always organize the events,
yeah,
but is it important, do you feel, to have, well, I think it's important to have a no shitcoin policy, right?
absolutely,
As
yeah.
an entry level
It's the
thing. I
100%
mean,
rules, yeah.
yeah. So, okay, look, I mean, and again, we can't really enforce that. But when it comes to the merchants adopting Bitcoin, I mean, what are you seeing from your perspective? Are you seeing the UK market maturing a little bit more? Is there people now willing to get paid in Bitcoin? Is that happening, or is it too insignificant at this stage?
Well, it's getting more significant. I mean, we are now at, I forget what we started off at, but we're around about 400 merchants now in the UK,
Mm,
and I think that's grown. I think it was like 50 or 60, um, 2.5 years ago. So one of the revelations for me really was when I first started Bitcoin events was that merchant adoption and the meetup scene work so brilliantly together, because if you've got a regular meetup in your town
mm,
where you've got, let's say we get up to 20, 30 guys in each meetup, you've got a lot of leverage then to when you go to your local hairdressers
mm,
or butchers to say, if you accept Bitcoin, there's 30 guys here which will come and use your butchers instead of any of the other butchers in town,
mm,
because
mm,
you'll be accepting our currency. So that was kind of like the revelation really, and the impetus for starting Bridge to Bitcoin, that if we could grow these two things together, we're growing the community side, and then
mm,
we're actually creating places where this community can then go and spend their
mm,
currency,
mm, mm.
and it's just a win-win for the businesses. There's no cost involved with Bitcoin and getting set up,
Yeah.
and and when they realize we're not trying to sell them Bitcoin, all we're trying to do is get them more business, because none of their existing customers are going to start paying in Bitcoin. Anyone that comes in, if you're a pub and you start accepting Bitcoin, anyone that comes in and plays with Bitcoin is a new customer, someone that's
Yeah.
come because you're now accepting this currency and you're tapping into this community
Yeah.
that's all over the country. And I liken it quite often, and was Chris's idea that it's very similar to like where if you're a hotel and you put a Tesla charger in your car park, you'll get all the Tesla drivers will come to that hotel.
Yeah.
So you've tapped into the Tesla market, and you describe it in that way to a business, and they're like, oh yeah, okay, so it's just a marketing thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
The orange pill side of it then
Mm-hmm.
happens a lot differently, a lot slower. They are accumulating and acquiring some Bitcoin, and then they're then able to they'll learn about it from the if it's a pub, there'll be meetups there. They'll hear conversations. They'll see how easy and normal it is to be accepting and paying with Bitcoin. We've had lots of cases like that where the pubs have initially said, no, we're not going to hold the Bitcoin. We're just going to convert it straight to fiat. And then they change their minds after a while and think, no,
Yeah.
actually, I can see that it's worth holding on to, and it's usually a small, like it's 1% of their total take-ins. I think to start with, they
Mm-hmm.
fear
Mm-hmm.
that every other person is going to come in and pay with this new weird currency that they don't know what to do with. But when they
Mm-hmm.
realise it's maybe 1% of their income, which is it's a new 1%. It's
Yeah.
definitely worth having. They start to learn then that and like we all do when we just buy a little bit out of just speculation, most people just buy a little bit of Bitcoin to start with, so they're
Mm-hmm.
acquiring it through their business, and then they're learning about it. So it takes time, and it's going to take probably another cycle for all these businesses to really appreciate. But we've got to start somewhere and start
Yeah.
this process off. And so it's working. On average, I think we're doing about 2 businesses per week, bridge to
Mm.
Bitcoin. So we're having Zoom calls all the time, just like this, where we can set people up over a Zoom call now. We don't have to
Right.
physically be in with the person to get them set up. So we
Yeah.
set them up, and then we do all the marketing side, put them on Twitter, just let the Bitcoin community know about.
That's awesome. That's
Yeah,
brilliant. I mean, like that's really hopeful, to be honest with you. I think that's great. I have a guest next week coming on the podcast who is a Bitcoin tax advisor based in the
okay,
UK, right? So he
yeah,
advises companies on how to handle the tax element of it, which I think is
right,
really interesting. And again, we might be a bit too early in that
yeah,
regard because considering it's 1 to 10% of the revenue, they're not, it's not a significant dent as things stand.
yeah,
But if these merchants turn out to be hodlers, and they will organically, it's going to start eating up into a big part of their balance sheet. And they're going to have to start thinking about, right, what do we do with this thing, which is just
mm,
basically growing quarter on quarter? I mean, do we sell it for something that's depreciating, or do we do something else with it, right? So I think there's an interesting sort of conversation there. And then
mm,
because he comes from let's say, a classical fiat accountancy background,
yeah,
his take on this is sort of treading the line between existing fiat policy with regards to taxation and how he feels small and medium sized businesses can be better prepared for the eventual, inevitable, as he says, Bitcoin standardization that will happen. May not be in our lifetimes, but at some point, if your business survives long enough,
yeah,
that's going to happen. So you're gonna have to start thinking about that.
yeah,
The ethical, well, not the ethical, but like the ethos of Bitcoin, though. Like, and this is something I find. So I spend Bitcoin, but I don't spend Bitcoin in the way Fold app tells me to spend, or whatever the app is to spend Bitcoin. I collateralize my Bitcoin, convert it into fiat because I never want to sell my bloody Bitcoin,
right,
right? Because it's a store of value for me. Now, if every Bitcoin hodler adopted that, you're not all you're going to get is something that's just simply going to grow in price. But I think the way you're looking at this, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you view Bitcoin as an actual circular economy that needs to propagate for it to actually be of any sort of, let's say, significant worth. Well, what's your? Have I got that right? Do you
yeah,
think it needs
yeah.
to circulate?
Yeah, it does. I think we always preach the spend and replace idea, you know. So you go to your local cafe that accepts Bitcoin, and you spend £17
Yeah.
worth of Bitcoin
For one coffee. Yeah.
for one coffee, yeah, and the biscuit, and then you just replace it with let's say £20 worth of Bitcoin, and it's so, you know, if you use Strike or any of
Yeah.
these apps, they're super quick, they're super simple. A few taps, you know, in the car on the way home, on the bus, you sit there and you just
Yeah.
replace what you've just spent. So when we go down to Tooting Market and spend money there, I mean, I was at the Southampton, came up from Southampton, the Southampton meetup, and went to Bedford last Saturday. And
Mm.
there was about 60 of us at the meetup, and we all went for a meal afterwards at La Teresa, this is an Italian restaurant in Bedford, and I spent about 120 quid's worth of Bitcoin through that day. But I'd actually preloaded my wallet, and I did it reverse that time. But I
Yeah.
bought a
Yeah.
bit
Yeah.
of Bitcoin in my wallet because I would have spent that fiat anyway.
Mm.
You see, so
Gotcha. Gotcha. Okay.
if you're going to spend it anyway, in pounds, you might as well buy the Bitcoin to then spend it, and then that merchant has now got some Bitcoin, and we're spreading it around. We're like these little fonts of Bitcoin, spraying it out into the world, into the
That's
community,
interesting. Yeah.
and your stack's not going down because you're quite quickly replacing it. And from a tax point of view as well, now with Bridge to Bitcoin, the three of us, the three
Mm-hmm.
partners, James is he's a qualified accountant and has been in the financial um, services industry for like 20 years, and he sort of talked to us about this. It's called the bed and breakfast rule, where
Right.
you, as long as you replace, so normally you would have to pay capital gains on when you've disposed of something that's gone
Yeah.
up in value. But if you replace it then within 30 days of spending it, that doesn't apply. So that when you sort of realize that, and even if you don't realize that, I mean, most people probably wouldn't even be bothered about that. But as long as they just don't want their stack to go down. And I could see in years ago when it was harder to get onto the exchange, transfer money across, you have to wait a couple of days for the money to clear and then change it into Bitcoin. Now, especially with like Strike or even Kraken, they have
Yeah.
you can withdraw via Lightning. It's really just a few clicks, and you've replaced what you've just spent. So there's no reason not to, in my mind now.
Yeah.
And then
That's a
we,
great
as
point, actually. Yeah.
Bitcoiners, we're spreading it around to our local communities, and again trying to, you know, like we talked about at the beginning, trying to raise that mood and the spirit of everyone that's around, and putting a bit of positivity, a bit of Bitcoin positivity into our local communities. I think
Yeah.
it's really important that we are the people that do that.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Now that's a good way of looking at it, because like I said, I mean, I prefer, well, not prefer, but I was using the collateralization option, right? So
Mm.
basically borrowing fiat against my Bitcoin at a pretty steep interest rate, considering it's essentially pristine sort of collateral. It's I can't believe some of the interest rates. I mean, I think I was charged like 20%, right, over a year. Which, look,
Yeah,
Bitcoin's gonna beat that in a year, but still, I mean, it's still 20% that I don't want to be paying, right? So, but I
yeah,
think this is a good way, because yeah, that's actually interesting, because all I'm doing really is spending fiat. Oh, sorry, spending Bitcoin, which in fiat terms I would have spent anyway, right? That's the point, right?
exactly. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So
So it's
at
not a
least
net loss for my stack.
no, no, absolutely not. And if you're managing it right, and maybe you just put if you've got your main stack in a hardware wallet, maybe you have
Mm,
another sort of on-chain wallet that's a little bit easier to get to,
mm,
and then you can use, or there's different ways of doing it. I mean, I
yeah.
just, kind of have an in-between wallet that is spendable from, but I replace it, and then it's a bit easier to track your balance. And just in Bitcoin terms, as long as it's not going down every month,
Mm.
it's only going up, then you know you've got to live anyway. You've got to eat. So if you can eat at a place that accepts Bitcoin, that's better
Yeah, you might as
for us
well.
all as
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Bitcoiners. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
And okay, and then have you looked at some of let's say economies like El Salvador where it's legal tender? Are you familiar with some of the mechanisms that are developing there? Do you see that as a sort of portent for what's going to happen in the future?
Yeah, I think seems to be we're maybe on the cusp of a few other countries
Mm.
going along in similar ways. I'd like to visit El Salvador. I've not been there yet. So yeah, I think it's a trend that's going to continue. What's the is it Bhutan? Yeah,
Yeah,
Bhutan.
Bhutan is the fourth largest hodler of
Yeah,
Bitcoin apparently.
yeah. After the UK. Um,
After
yeah,
the UK, correct? Yeah,
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 yeah. So I think maybe they'll. I don't know what it's like as a destination to go to,
yeah.
whether
Well, I'll tell you
lots
this
of
much about
tourists or anything.
Bhutan. They have a global happiness index. They don't have a GDP.
Oh,
They have a
that's right.
gross happiness index, not a GDP. So it looks to me, at least, that most of their policies are actually meant to optimize that KPI, which is
Right. Well, that's a much
which
better
is great,
idea, then,
right? I
isn't it?
mean, Bitcoin just fits seamlessly into that narrative because, again, if you think about it, it's a nation of, well, not
Is,
I don't want to characterize the entire nation, but a bunch of monks in the
yeah,
Himalayas
isn't that
getting
Buddhist?
Bitcoin is
Yeah,
something very cool about it.
yeah, yeah. Well, yeah. Like we're saying, spread the happiness. They may be doing it themselves over there. Yeah, it's just inevitable. I think it to me. El Salvador's a great example to the rest of the world. You see him at the moment that where Bukele's getting flack from the IMF,
IMF.
and he's just sitting back and saying we don't need your money. So that's going to be interesting to see, how that plays out and really does. Is he able to because these are powerful people in the world? Is he able to
Mm,
resist their they might be asking nicely at the moment, but they might start being less nice eventually and
mm,
start playing moving their chess pieces around to try and push back against him in some roundabout sneaky ways. Um,
mm,
so we'll have to see what happens. I think there's obviously like the sovereign individual thesis where there's going to be a brain drain from these countries like the UK, like anywhere that's got these terrible policies, and that we're getting poorer and less energy rich, and people are struggling, and then they think, well, why can't I just get outside of this fiat trap where I'm having to work every day in a terrible job to pay a mortgage on a house to live in an area I don't really like or want to live
mm,
in. If I can just break free of all these bills that pile up on me,
mm.
um, and then move to one of these countries where things seem to be much more positive. And I think that's a natural thing as people accumulate more Bitcoin and they see a bit more freedom in their future, and they realize that they don't have to be tied to a location. Our houses tie us to a location, and that's an accident of the fiat money system,
Yeah.
where because money is supposed to be a store of value and a unit of exchange as
Mm-hmm.
well. But since like we came off of a gold standard, those
Mm-hmm.
things split in half, and
Yeah.
paper fiat money is still a good unit of exchange. You can still send it
Yeah.
really easily, but it's
Yeah.
not a store of value at all.
No,
So
it's
humans naturally sort of became started using property and real estate as their store of value. So, but that has tied us to geographically to a place, and then the government
exactly.
are able to get away with a lot more stuff because we just feel we can't get out of it, so we just accept it and
Yeah.
roll over. But with
Yeah.
Bitcoin,
No.
obviously, it brings those two things back together, and
Exactly.
it's a perfect store of value and a perfect unit of exchange together as
Yeah.
one, and you can take it anywhere with you in the world and just do
Absolutely.
it.
Yeah.
So yeah, as people sort of get to realize that, um,
Yeah.
I think people will start flooding to countries that are giving people the best deals. If it's El Salvador, they'll go there. If it's Argentina, they'll go there. Wherever.
Yeah, yeah, no, exactly. And I think that's a great point about fiat money, right? So I view fiat cash as it's basically a coupon. It's like a Burger King
Yeah,
coupon that comes with an expiry date. The only difference is the expiry date isn't printed on the actual note, right? But it does have an expiry
yeah,
date
yeah,
because if you don't trade that for goods or services in the now, you're just going to get fewer of them. And
yeah,
my argument is that this entire concept of a store of value only arises because you're not on a hard money standard, right?
Mm,
If you were on a gold standard or a Bitcoin standard, you don't need a store of value. Your money
no.
is the store of value. I don't have to work. So as Safety says, a fiat job. I mean, you've got to work it twice. One to actually do the job to earn the money, and then the second to actually keep that
To keep it,
purchasing
yeah,
power, right? So
absolutely.
you're actually doing double the effort of what more than that. And to make it worse, you're up against the likes of hedge funds, by the way, who have direct control. Well, not direct, but like who are much closer to the printer than you ever can be as a pleb, right? So you're
Mm,
up against them just to keep your own purchasing power, despite using your skills to actually earn the money in the real world. It's just an
yeah.
absolute travesty, you
Yeah,
know?
it's great. Yeah, and it forces people to take risks with their money. People didn't need to, like in ancient Babylon or something. They weren't like investing in pension funds. They were just putting money to the side through their life and building
Yeah,
up a little
under the
pot of
mattress.
gold
Yeah,
coins that
exactly.
they could then had. And one day they thought, well, I've got enough there now to just live off for the rest of my life, you know. But
Yeah.
nowadays we know, whether we know it consciously or not, the normie on the street knows that his purchasing power is going down. He sees that a Mars bar used to be 15p and now they're £1.20 or whatever they are.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know, so
yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
money just progressively gets worth less, and it's not because it's never mentioned in the mainstream media. It's not talked about. It's not taught in the schools. They they don't have a sort of frame of reference to put all these, conceptualize it all together. They're not learning kind of like first principles
Mm,
of how the world works. So they don't have, they have all the information and all their opinions that they have comes from mainstream media and what
mm,
mainstream media are telling them. They have no first principles to just go back to and say, oh well, if I think this, then and then I should think this, and that's, you know,
yeah,
makes total sense that we I should do that because these are the core
yeah,
principles of a great philosophy.
exactly. And I think people are subconsciously, or even if there's a level below consciousness that's below sub, right? But I think there is this thing where people are sort of realizing it so much that they are taking decisions which are very anti hard money. So, things like if you look at the average age that somebody buys a house in the UK, it's now almost at its 40s, right? Because if you look at the average age of marriage in the UK,
Yeah,
it's trending upwards. If you look at how many kids people are having, it's trending downwards. The
yeah,
age at which the people are having these kids are also trending upwards. So it's kind of like people realize it on some level that things are more expensive. But instead of actually countering that with the hard money technology, they've gone and said, right, let me just optimize my life for the fiat world as opposed to breaking free from the fiat world. I think Bitcoin's this philosophy where it's like, well, nah, screw your system. I'm going to play my game, right? And it's like a totally different way of doing it. But I think a lot of people just sort of inherently have this feeling, and they're like, I'm helpless, but all I can do is this, and that's what I'm doing.
yeah. That,
It's the most rational thing to actually consume in a money which is depleting. Like it's actually really rational to go out
yeah,
and blow your paycheck on day one rather than
yeah.
blowing it 10 years down the line. You know?
The only way to get more is to step on other people's heads and
Yeah,
and not do it in an honest kind of way quite often. So yeah, it's
yeah, yeah. It's rent
incentivizing
seeking as well. Rent seeking
robbing each
behavior.
other, and yeah, how can I
Yeah,
get one up on the neighbor? You know, it's
yeah,
incentivizes that kind of attitude, which Bitcoin doesn't. Bitcoin incentivizes working together because we're all, whatever helps me and my Bitcoin stash helps you and your Bitcoin stash. So we all work together. This is like we talk about this sometimes, you know, when we're onboarding businesses and we're all kind of working together. We were on a call once with the guys in Madeira, and we were sort of going through our onboarding process of how we were onboarding the businesses here as they were just beginning to get into to merchant adoption over there, and we were all just working together. And that's not how businesses traditionally work. They keep their secrets and their trade secrets, and they don't
yeah,
want to sort of share them with somebody else,
yeah,
because those people are going to get one up on them then. But but we just share. This is the vision of how the future will be. I think when we can all just more peacefully work together, and
Yeah.
what betters your life betters my life, and
Yeah. Yeah.
I think
So do you think
that's
the people out there who, I'm not even talking about the plebs, I'm talking about the people in power who have, let's say, the Cantillon effect, right? The guys
yeah.
up in the upper echelons who are pulling the strings, as it were.
Mm.
Are they, do they not get Bitcoin, or are they simply disincentivized from getting it because if they're talking themselves out of their access to a money printer, or do they fully get it and they're literally opposing this thing in the only way they know they can? Well, which of those three do you think, or is there a completely different angle here?
Well, I think it's all of that. I think they there's a massive portion of these people that think they're the elites that don't understand it at all. Those that do understand it or are beginning to understand it realize what a threat it is to their way of life and their system and their access to the money printer, and they're scared to death that it's an end of this whole fiat Ponzi scheme, which they've
Mm,
been enriched on and their families have been enriched on for decades and decades. So I think there's an element of them that are beginning to get it, like the Bitcoin community, where most people, if there's 1.3 million people that have Bitcoin, but there's only probably, I see the same faces no matter what
yeah, 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 yeah.
meetups I go to. So I think in the fiat sort of upper echelons of power, there's a lot of them, but there's a certain element to them that are beginning to figure the threat to them that Bitcoin is, and so they are the people. I think it's obviously a lot of the reasons why the media is against Bitcoin, because they control the media. They lobby governments, so the governments are against it. There's just a lot of um, incentive for them not to understand it and dismiss it. And those that do understand it will naturally push back against it because it's a threat
Mm,
to their jobs.
mm,
But at the same time, we say that the governments are just made up of individuals, and so each individual is will want to better their own life. So as they
yeah.
see the ship sinking, they're going to want to acquire some Bitcoin themselves, and then once they've got a little, and I think that this is why America is further ahead. I think there's a lot more senators in the US
Mm,
which personally own Bitcoin than if
yeah.
you did a survey around the House of Commons here. There's probably a lot more in the US that personally own it, and so they're not going to push back too strongly
Mm,
against something that is going to be negative in their own personal life.
mm,
So
mm,
I think that will happen slowly, and Bitcoin policy. That's one of the things I think there maybe will be good for that they're infiltrating into that political realm, and if they can just orange pill a few politicians, if that's all they ever do, then that
mm,
that sort of helps our case and cancels out some of those votes when they are going to vote for different policies.
mm,
If they think,
mm.
well, I'm not going to vote against Bitcoin here because my my portfolio is going to be negatively affected by it, and my brother and my son's got some as well, and so yeah, no,
Yeah.
I'm gonna vote for the positive
Yeah. It's kind of
choice.
like the housing market, right? If you think about it, I mean, a lot of
Yeah,
MPs own second homes. They own their own investment homes, and why would they ever pass something as stringent as rent control laws, for example? Because again, it
exactly.
disincentivizes their money flow, right? Their cash
Yeah,
flow, it gets negatively impacted. So I think something like that might transpire to Bitcoin, but I think we're a long way from that. Personally speaking, I think it's the ego. It's the ego, right? It's losing your, or sort of discarding everything you think you know about the world,
yeah,
has to be completely sort of got back to ground zero, and then you build it up again. That requires humility, and generally what I've noticed is people in power seem to lack seem to lack a lot of that humility. So
yeah.
unless
They do.
it's, yeah. So I think that's actually one of the biggest barriers for Bitcoin adoption, just our own mentality.
Yeah, I think there is a natural pyramid in the hierarchy of the power structure as well, though obviously. So there's more people at the bottom, and those when you start getting to the very top, and it's the central banks and those
Mm.
Bilderbergs and the Rothschilds and all that kind of stuff right at the top. There's less of them. There's
Mm.
so the power's always with the people, and as they as to get it, that they can't. There's less people that are going to be able to be stolen from, and yeah, I get it will take a while, but
Yeah.
I think I'd like to. I'm quite positive on the timescale. I think this bull run's going to have a massive effect, and then by the next one, by 2028, I think 2029, by the time it starts to rip again, I think there'll be we'll be again in like another 10 times of where we are after next year. So
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm positive that more people will be engulfed by the Bitcoin bubble.
Yeah, I think so too. I think so too. But let's see, we'll yeah, it's and I think the work you're doing in sort of centralizing and making sure that these events are happening and having an easy resource for normal plebs like myself to get access to, I think that's great. I think that's brilliant. I think we need to start talking more about Bitcoin. I think we need to meet more Bitcoiners, and
Mm,
you're definitely a key sort of role, at least in the UK, in making that happen. Um, the one last thing, and I don't want to end it on a negative necessarily, but what I feel is a threat, even with merchant adoption in the UK, and plebs spending their Bitcoin, and the government allowing you to spend your Bitcoin, right? I mean, for
mm,
whatever allow means in that context. Um, Banks could tomorrow turn off your on and off ramps, right? And I understand, yeah, your Strike is connected to your bank account.
yeah.
Your Kraken is the same way. Um, is Bitcoin, from a spending sense, actually residing on a fiat foundation where the rails could be switched off for you? What do you do in that scenario? And do you think
Well,
it's likely at all to happen?
um, I think every day that goes by, it's probably less likely, but it's still something that we should absolutely think about, and have a backup plan for. I think again, bring everything back to the meetups, but the meetups are
Mm.
definitely a place where there is some Bitcoin buying goes on at some of the meetups. People selling a little bit that are perhaps living more on a Bitcoin standard, selling it
Yeah,
to some of the other members that are just getting started. So the meetups are a good place to buy and sell Bitcoin. But there's like Peach and RoboSats, and there's lots of peer to peer ways of acquiring Bitcoin. So if the government switched off all the on ramps, I think that's a massive slowdown to adoption. But it's not gonna stop it, because
mm.
people can still meet in the street.
You
There's
can do peer to peer. Yeah,
yeah, there's Vexel. I've been looking a lot into Vexel recently, which is another
right.
bit like RoboSats. It's just a matchmaking marketplace for people. They don't hold any funds or anything. They just, if you want to buy Bitcoin, they match you with someone in your local area that you can see people that want to sell it. It's all anonymous. It's pretty good service.
Non KYC, is it?
It's non KYC. Yeah, it's run by Satoshi Labs that do
Make the
Trezor.
wallet as
Yeah,
well,
make
I
Trezor.
think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a good service, and I think the market will naturally, if the government was going to turn it all off, we're not just going to be. I mean, maybe for the first few weeks we'll have the solutions that we have at the moment, but the market will ramp up in all the peer to peer. All these coders will start coming up with all sorts of ways that we can buy and sell Bitcoin between
Yeah.
us without any banking system at all. It's possible to
Mm.
do it. It will slow down adoption because most normies are not going to be doing that. They're not, and if Coinbase doesn't exist, then they're not advertising on TV, and then there's all that money goes into the advertising side of it. So it will definitely hinder adoption, but it doesn't
Mm.
stop it. It just slows it down, and maybe that's annoying when you know, I don't want to wait until I'm 90 years old before I can live in a Bitcoin standard
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
world,
yeah, yeah.
but I want it to happen sooner rather than later. But I think the market I've got faith in the Bitcoin community to come up with ways of
Yeah,
fixing anything that the government kind of stops.
yeah,
You know,
yeah.
they
I think
they
it's a great opportunity for. I mean, look again. If our libertarian slash free market principles are actually correct, then and that we don't actually need the government. I mean, it's basically a waste of resource. Then yeah, I mean that hypothesis would suggest to you that the free market would actually solve for that problem. In fact, it would solve for that problem preemptively, which is what some of the solutions you described are sort of doing
yeah
anyway.
yeah
You know,
yeah
so
yeah.
yeah,
It's they'll fix it. The free market always wins out, doesn't it? So
brilliant, brilliant. Look, Simon, it's been an absolute pleasure. I know we're just over the hour mark, so I'm gonna end with my rapid fire round, right? So
oh,
again,
okay,
no pressure. There's no wrong answers.
okay, all right,
Um, and it's what is it? It's 5 questions. So
okay.
question one. Describe Bitcoin in one word.
Freedom.
Nice. Okay. What non-zero chance would you place on Bitcoin actually being a psyop that's being run by the elites?
So I can't say 0. 1% then. It's
Really?
that
No?
it's a psyop run by the elites. The
Yeah.
Bitcoin, yeah.
I mean,
I mean,
could be.
it's pretty well backfired on them if it is. Yeah.
So 1%. Okay, fair enough. I'll
Well,
take that. Um,
mm,
how often
we'll
do you
see.
check the Bitcoin price?
Um, all the time. Unfortunately, I've got it on like widgets on my phone. Whenever I look
Yeah,
at my phone screen, it's there. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Unfortunately, I'd like to say no, I never look at it, but it's several times, probably an hour. Every time I look
Yeah.
at my phone.
I'm the same. I'm the same. Um, will there ever be harder money?
Can't imagine how. No. Maybe in the future there'll be something that we just cannot envision now that's like a galactic hard money or something. Because Bitcoin doesn't work. If you've read some of those sci-fi, was it Bitcoin and Astronomy? That article, Bitcoin and Astronomy, that talks about
Right.
how you could Bitcoin wouldn't work on Mars because of
Timing.
the timing of the 10-minute timing of getting the
Hmm.
transactions wouldn't work. I think it would work on the moon, but not Mars. But maybe aliens come down and figure out they've got a different kind of Bitcoin that works on a galactic scale, maybe.
Mm,
But
mm,
but
mm,
Bitcoin's the invention of, or the discovery of digital scarcity, isn't it? So you
mm.
can't discover that twice. It's like,
Gotcha. Gotcha.
yeah,
Yeah.
that wasn't
Okay.
very good,
Cool.
but sorry.
No, no, that's fine. That's fine. We like it. And the last question, I guess, I mean, it's $1 trillion question at this stage.
Yeah.
So, who do you think Satoshi is or was?
Well, I have long been in the camp of it being Len Sassaman, but that's become, especially in the last couple of days, because I think that's what that new HBO
Yeah,
documentary.
that's their finding as well, I think.
That's what they say. Yeah, I read that article about Len Sassaman a couple of years ago, and I've always sort of said that's who I thought it was. I mean, I think there's been a bit of pushback now to that. I'm seeing on Twitter. I was just seeing this morning actually, but
Mm.
for me, that's still the most likely case, unless I'm sure some more information will come out about this documentary because it's a HBO documentary. It's going to be big, so maybe some information will come out that will prove that maybe it wasn't, or make it much less likely that it was him.
Mm.
But for me, I've always, and since I read that a couple of years ago, before that it was more of maybe it was Nick Szabo and Hal Finney
Hal Finney?
together.
Yeah.
Hal Finney and Nick Szabo, maybe, some combination of those original cypherpunks. Bit of, they're all kind of, Adam Back obviously created, the proof
Yeah.
of work
Peer to peer. Yeah.
algorithm. So it was a few people, but that the actual one person that put all those together, I still feel perhaps it was Len Sassaman, but maybe that article was maybe slanted and has convinced
Yeah,
me
it
that it
might
was
have,
him.
might have. Yeah, I just
Um,
love the idea that we probably will never know, and I don't think
yeah, me
even
too.
Bitcoin cares. It's
Yeah,
still TikTok next block. Even if Satoshi was to magically appear, yes, you're going to see a fluctuation in the short-term fiat price of it because that would
yeah,
essentially
that's
mean
yeah,
he's still around. But so what?
yeah.
I
I
mean, do
hope
I
we don't
care?
ever find out. I hope that if it is, I don't think it would be good for Len Sassaman's family if it was proven that it was him. So yeah, I think we're much better off not knowing. It's
Yeah,
great. The mythology is one of the
it's
great
brilliant,
things
isn't it?
behind Bitcoin. that we just do not know, and it's an eternal mystery.
Yeah.
I hope it remains an eternal mystery.
Gotcha.
That's the
Brilliant.
best way.
Look, on that note, Simon, thanks a lot for your time. I know it's Saturday morning, so yeah, look, thanks again for taking the time and doing this. It'll be out on all the usual channels, and definitely for all the people out there, Bitcoin Events UK, give them a follow, learn about it, especially if in the UK. I mean, you've no excuse not to pop down to one of these, learn
Yeah.
about Bitcoin, talk Bitcoin. You do that anyway, so you might as well do it in person.
Yeah,
Um,
and subscribe to the Bitcoin Events newsletter, which is on Substack. It's bitcoinevents.substack.com. It's a weekly summary and roundup of all the upcoming meetups each week, and also it's a summary of the merchants, the Bitcoin merchants that have just started accepting Bitcoin in that previous week as well. So it's a good little community roundup weekly. It comes out every Sunday morning.
awesome.
So subscribe to that, and yeah, keep informed.
Perfect. Cheers, Simon.
All right, thank you very much.
Thanks again.
See ya. Bye.
Bye.